If you have ever looked around at your life and thought, this can't be it, you are in the right place. This is Flying Upstream, the podcast for people who refuse to live on autopilot. I'm your host, Kristin Medeiros. Each week, I sit down with people who questioned the rules, challenged the expectations, and chose a different path. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. We talk about the moments that broke them open, the decisions that scared them, and the lives they built when they stopped doing what they were told and started listening to themselves. If you are done following the crowd and ready to trust your own way forward, stay with me. Let's fly upstream. Hey, free spirits. Welcome back to Flying Upstream. I'm your host, Kristin Medeiros. Today's conversation is about what happens when success does not equal freedom and when survival instincts quietly turn into self-betrayal. My guest today is someone whose life reads like fiction, but every part of it is real. He ran away from an abusive childhood and experienced homelessness as a teenager. Against all odds, he went to college. That single act transformed the entire trajectory of his life. He went on to spend 4 decades inside Fortune 500 companies across oil and gas, technology, and early artificial intelligence systems. He worked at places many people believe are the finish line. He made good money, he carried influence, and still he was burning out from the inside. After a breakdown and a layoff from Microsoft in his mid to late 50s, he was forced to confront something he had been running from his entire life: trauma, post-traumatic stress, addiction, and the realization that chasing intelligence and achievement alone had become toxic. This is a conversation about dying to false identities, about choosing peace over the grind, and about learning how to live only after something inside you ends. Please help me welcome Guy Morris. Welcome to Flying Upstream.
Kristin, thank you very much. Very gracious introduction. Thank
Amazing. All right, let's get into it. So you started life with almost every deck stacked against you. Homeless as a teenager, working alongside migrant workers, and still you made it to college. What did education give you that survival never could?
Perspectives on things I never understood. And when we don't understand things, they can feel threatening. How the world works, how the economy works, how banking works, how what labor unions were versus, all of the things that you kind of get glimpses on in the news, but without an education, you're just reliant on whatever they say to give you an opinion about what you think, but you don't really know. And that fear, I grew up in an environment where fear was a powerful tool to keep you in line. And lack of knowledge can lead to fear. And so it taught me, it gave me power to understand how the world works. So I was no longer felt like people could pull the wool over my eyes. And it gave me confidence that um, if I could figure those things out, I could figure anything out. And I was always told from the time I can remember that I was stupid, semi-worthless. My only hope at having a career was to join a trade union, and anything beyond that was just me wishful thinking. And when I told my mother that I was going to go to college, her first instinct was to slap me because she thought I was getting too uppity for my own good. So it was a transformation on almost every level of my psychology, of my thinking, of my understanding. It was an enormously transformative experience, and for years, it gave me the mantra that I don't want to let my past define my future.
That's something that I want to just pause and reflect on for a minute, because that is very hard for most people to even say those words. Like, so many people have had certain experiences in life that are out of our control, and we carry it with us for not just years, decades, sometimes even our whole life. And to be able to say, I'm not going to let that define me anymore. I am truly going to start fresh every day when I wake up and take the path that I want forward is huge. So I just want to acknowledge that. That's a
It,
pretty
it,
big
it,
deal.
think we have to be honest to say that it's not easy. It's not a straight line. There's a lot of setbacks. There's a lot of failed days where you wake up and you can't say that. You're emotionally just not ready to. You're too broken or whatever, or too distracted by something. And while that was became a mantra, it was a process that's still ongoing after several decades. So it's not it's not a destination as much as a way of approaching a difficult life.
Mm,
And and because I don't think you're ever really fully at that point where the paths sit behind.
yeah.
And so it's an ongoing process.
I certainly can appreciate that, even in my own life. So, okay, so you've got this amazing mantra. You go forward, you spend decades inside massive corporations and high power environments. From the outside, looks like success. It looks like you've got it all. But from the
Yeah.
inside, what was it really costing you?
Uh, it, we go into these situations with illusions of what that means. That the guy with the big desk doesn't have to work as hard, or that he has more power than you think he has, that he really does have. And you realize that it's going to cost you something. Those that success didn't, meant sometimes 60, 80 hour work weeks. Those 60, 80 hour work weeks meant you never got to see your kids. By the time I left in the morning, they were still asleep. By the time I got home at night, they're often asleep again. Um, it it cost me my first marriage. I the stress while I had gotten sober for a few years, I was a drug addict as a kid. The stress pushed me back into alcohol and drugs and other bad behavior. And because while I had the intellectual tools to model the entire economy in a way that changed how the Federal Reserve changed the way they modeled the economy, I didn't have the emotional tools. I didn't have the emotional intelligence. I didn't have the example of what a good man does when times get stressful and how to react to other people. And so I found that I had this. I always felt that I was on the outside looking into extremely successful people who had grown up in successful families who, fathers bought them brand new cars in high school, and they were as new graduates, they'd come to work with $800 alligator shoes, and I was still the poor kid trying to prove myself, afraid that if anybody found out that I was just still a poor kid, my career would be done.
Yeah.
And so there was a sense that I was always having to hide who I really was, my fears, insecurities, all of those things. And it took me decades to accept the fact that I had an extremely high IQ and I deserved to be there. But that was decades of me going to work every day feeling like I didn't belong. That
Yeah.
somehow I had fooled everybody to get these roles, and if I didn't just kill myself to outperform other people, I would be found out.
And that's real for a lot of people too, not just the imposter syndrome piece, but feeling like you don't belong, you don't fit because you don't have what you perceive everybody else to have, the $800 alligator shoes, parents buying you a new car, and that's all part of it. And I appreciate what you said earlier is that you were really driven by fear that ruled everything. And because in general, fear is a tool to control people, right?
Yeah.
That is what was kind of going on. You felt like you had to fall in line, work extra, extra hard, harder, prove yourself to everybody else. And then I know after doing this for a while, eventually, you got laid off from Microsoft, and that was a major breaking point for you. What did that moment force you to face that you had avoided for years?
That I really didn't want to be reliant on the system to define my living and my livelihood. That I needed to, and it was the situation with Microsoft was unique. I actually was performing. I had been performing really well. I'd gotten two or three different special bonuses from the president. But during the 10 years I was there, I had 6 or 7 new VP bosses as they would kind of roll through. And I
Wow.
had developed a program that was very controversial at the time, and I had to fight to get it off the ground. But once it did, it became so successful, everybody wanted my job. Um, and they brought in a new VP, and I had switched to a role where I was my team was supposed to go after multi-million-dollar deals, and I had a metric. My goal was I had to win 65% of them, which is 2 to 3 times the industry average. And I did that because I felt that we were that good, we could do it. He came in, it was right before the crash. He said, "Well, if I'm not going to do any really big deals this year, I don't need any big deal team." And so he let us all go. Now that was also happened to be at a time where my brother had just passed away. My daughter was pulling away. One of my dearest friends, we were having a kind of a falling out. And so it was just one at that time when I didn't feel like I think psychologically, and I didn't understand at the time, but I didn't have any safety nets. And I just burned myself out. And I burned myself out so much to get to the role where I was at, where I could achieve 65% win rates when nobody else could, that I was exhausted mentally, emotionally, and it was a breaking point that said, okay, enough is enough. I can't keep doing this. I don't know what else to do. This is who I am. I was really good at it. My even my own team, oftentimes 10, 20 years younger than me, used to call me the machine. I don't mind the hard work. I have a highly dysfunctional relationship with leisure. Don't let me sit around too long. I've got to do something. So the work wasn't bad. The politics, though, the infighting, the stabbing, the not knowing who to trust, that triggered my PTSD.
Yeah,
And
I can
feeling that
imagine.
betrayed by the people that I had worked so hard to make successful, that was like a stab in the back that just took me emotionally to a place I didn't even really understand, because I had, through all of this time, one of the effects of PTSD, and I learned about this later. My brother actually was diagnosed with complex PTSD right before he died and called me up and introduced me to the concept. I rejected it at first, you know. But one of the side effects is amnesia. You forget things. And when I started sitting down to think about it, I realized I couldn't remember more than maybe 20, 30% of my entire childhood. And
Mm.
it started the cascade. It started the cascade of me realizing that something was deeply broken and that I couldn't just go back to another super high pressure executive job without dealing with this first. And once I started dealing with it, I started questioning, do I really want to go back to another high pressure job?
Hmm.
Is that, and
Right.
I've done that for 40 years. Maybe it's a chance to change my tires and rethink who I am. And so it was a catalyst. Um, and it was a catalyst to force me to face things I didn't. Nobody wants to face this stuff.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go back and relive a childhood they barely survived.
No, of course
Nobody
not.
wants those emotional upheavals that they can't control. But I came to, I used to be good at suppressing it, drugs, alcohol, whatever. When I realized I was no longer good at suppressing it, it was time to fix it.
Hmm.
So
And I appreciate that you took that time to sit in that for a while and to acknowledge that there are some things you need to address because a lot of people don't. It's too painful. It's just too painful. And in the moment, it's easier to ignore it, push it down, drugs, alcohol, addictions. Like in the moment seems like a great coping mechanism. But obviously, for the long term, it's actually
when
not
it,
that
you know,
healthy.
I've got a lot of things to do. I can't think about this right now. I'll deal with
Exactly.
that someday.
Exactly.
And the
Yeah.
someday came at an inopportune time.
Yeah. Well, I want to switch a little bit. I want to fast forward just a little bit to your writing because I know that came later in life and it came with some real doubt too. I want to hear a little bit about at what point did you realize storytelling might be your most honest form of leadership?
Wow, that's a great question. When I was younger, I was a single parent, and my son used to love to read, and so I home every night. I had lots of computers and things to do, and I thought, well, I had never really got to enjoy a childhood, and so all of my reading experiences started in college. But I thought, I don't know if I could ever write something. I said, well, but let me start with maybe a kid's book here or a young adult book, a Hardy Boys kind of thing. And so, because I had time at home and I was after the divorce, so there was no money to go anywhere or do anything. So it was just me and my son all the time. He'd go to bed. And as I said, I have a hard time just sitting around doing nothing. So I decided to write a book. And it was called Paolo and the Shark. And I figured, okay, my son, he like, treasure and pirates and, lost cities and, ghosts, you kind of get all these little cliche things. And so I started kind of dabbling with these ideas. Well, he loved it. His cousins loved it. And I never thought anything about it. Never tried to really get it published. But I enjoyed the experience and and when I started to write a sequel form, I wanted it to be based on the kind of books that I preferred, which are books that are actually based on real history, real science, real things that then you can take narrations for them. And one of my favorite examples was Jurassic Park. Michael Crichton was a medical doctor. He thought that dabbling with DNA and cloning was not only morally dangerous, but combining it with the hubris and pride of humanity would lead to bad things. And instead of writing a white paper to his other doctor friends saying we need to be careful, we don't want to be the bad guys, he said, well, I'm just going to illustrate how this could go wrong, and that became a hit movie.
Yeah.
And so that inspired me to deal with throughout my career. I had been eyewitnesses to not only early stages of AI, how the government was using AI, um, climate change cover up at the oil companies. I was power brokering at the highest levels out that the media never got to see, and I was coming from a very poor background. There was a part of me that had to deal with the moral dilemma of, well, this is just what it takes to be at this tier of the power structure. And but another part of me said, yeah, but this is wrong. And I couldn't let go of that this is wrong feeling. And so I started realizing that I had the power and the knowledge to deal with things at an intellectual level that most people don't, from AI, technology, science, geopolitics, and economics. And then the third thing, which was more of a side obsession for me, prophecy and analytics. And I realized I could put some of the spirituality and the economics and the science together and start looking at those moral conflicts. And more than the science itself, more than the AI itself, I wanted it to be about how it could be changing our humanity. And so I was able to bring all of my traumatic experiences and people for years said, Guy, you should write a memoir. And I said, hell no. I lived through it once. I had to go through it twice in therapy. Third time is not going to be the charm for me. But I can put elements, bits and pieces into the characters to make them more real, to make them more vulnerable, to give them deeper, richer, more believable arcs, to make that connection between all of these conflicting things that we watch on the news every day and bringing it back to our humanity, bringing it back to how people are dealing with this. And so it's I wasn't sure at first if I could do this at all, but I've made an entire career out of going out and trying to do things that other people said I would fail at doing. And so I thought, well, there's I only know if I go out and really try. And so I decided to really put my professional, you know, obsessive, don't stop till I drop mentality and work ethic to it. And the first book I finished was the one that was based on the story from my son. And I wound up actually basing that on a real historical mystery that took me 12 years to solve. Um, and when I first finished it, I felt that it had some really incredible elements and discoveries that just blew my mind. And I hired a really expensive developmental editor. And I said, rip this up, build, and tell me how to stitch myself back together. God bless her. She took me at my word. 44 single-spaced typewritten pages of notes of things I was doing bad, things I needed to do better, lessons I needed to learn, books I needed
Wow.
to read, you know, and every single page of the manuscript had been marked up. And my first thought was, oh God, I can't do this. I suck. But after I licked my wounds for a couple of weeks and got over my wounded pride, I realized she had done exactly what I had asked her to do. And I was very grateful that she was so bluntly ruthless, but it allowed me to go back and really rework things. And that became Book Trip's favorite 25 books of 2021. And so it gave me the framework. I told her this needs to be my master class. This is my graduate class of how to become a writer. And I've been carrying all of that through, and every single book so far has become an award-winning thriller. I've been compared to
Incredible.
Dan Brown, Michael Crichton, James Rawlings, um, Robert Ludlum, a few others. And I'm grateful for the fact that I allowed her to tear me up first.
Absolutely. Wow, you have an incredible story, Guy. And as we're winding down here, we've got one last question for you. If someone listening right now is still clinging to that version of success that is slowly destroying them, what truth would you want them to hear before it costs them more?
Life is more than about the things that we can accumulate. It's about the people, it's about the experiences, and it's about the sense of wholeness that we can hold within ourselves without anything else attached. And it used to be that I was defining myself based on the view of where my house was and who my neighbors were and the car that I was driving and how much stock options I was getting. And I'm learning that what's been more important to me are the times I spend doing things with my wife, the times I spend seeing my grandkids, the times I spend exploring new things. That the world is so enormously saturated with cool information, historical, scientific, futuristic, everything, cultures, geographies, architecture, art. And we spend so much time basically making money for somebody else. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, we're just cogs in that wheel.
Hmm.
Um, Few of us will ever be the Elon Musks and the Peter Thiels of the world who can pull the strings of society. And we don't have to be happy. And I realized that before I died, I didn't want the end of my epitaph to be, he was the machine. I wanted it to be something more like, he opened my eyes.
So
And I
beautiful.
realized to do that, I needed to make some changes.
Yeah. Incredible. Guy, your story is incredible, and I really want to thank you for your courage and your willingness to tell the truth about the parts of success that no one likes to talk about. You brought depth, honesty, and really a rare clarity to this conversation. And I just appreciate that you sharing what it looks like when you stop letting trauma drive ambition, to release the false goals that keep us trapped, and choosing peace over proving. So, thank you so much for all of this. Your story truly is a living example that the past does not get to own the future, and that purpose can begin at any age when we are brave enough to face ourselves. Thank you so much for flying upstream with me today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
If today's conversation sparked something in you, take a moment to sit with it. You can find more episodes and resources at flyingupstreampodcast.com. And if this show speaks to you, the best way to support it is to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who is ready to question the path they are on. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and always keep flying upstream.